Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here. We're down in the lower level of Pioneer Plaza, downtown, at the core of downtown, at the center of the business community downtown, broadcasting 4 hours of fresh, new, live interviews and talk shows every afternoon, every weekday afternoon. And then we replay those all night long. So we give you 24/7 on this very interesting content, ranging from one side of what's going on here to the other side. And I run into people all the time now and tell me they mainline think tech. How do you like that? Stop laughing. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, who joins us by telephone from Hilo, Hawaii. He's the founder and progenitor of ProVision Solar. And he knows a lot about solar, and that's why we love to talk to Marco about what's going on, because he has this great 50,000-foot view, which always helps us understand what's happening in clean energy. Okay, in today's show, we're calling it Does PV Compute? Okay, and that means let's look at the numbers, and let's look at the numbers and see, how well things did at the end of last year for PV installers, how well they're doing now, and how that affects, other sources of clean energy in the state, and the initiative in general, the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, which some people think has kind of gone away in favor of specific interests, and that's another policy question to talk about. Anyway, Marco, hi. Thank you for joining us yet still again.
Hey, Jay. Fantastic to be back with you again, and as always.
Yeah. So let's see. What do we got? Green Tech Media. What's going on with them this week?
Well, one of the writers there, in fact, the editor, a fellow by the name of Eric Westhoff, wrote a piece that just came out today, looking from his perspective on the mainland at the Hawaii PV scene, essentially giving a fresh set of eyes, ears, and mind to the various issues that Oahu and also the state at large are dealing with, in terms of we are now officially have become the most saturated, so to speak, PV state in the country. What I mean by that is that there are more PV systems installed somewhere in the 41 to 42,000 range on a per person, per capita basis compared to anywhere in the country. So we now have the dual high distinction of having more solar water heating systems per capita, and also more solar PV per capita. Not on a total generating basis, because small states like Arizona have a lot more utility scale projects than we do in terms of total capacity. But as far as number of systems on a per person basis, we're numero uno, which I think is certainly something to be proud of. So
can we dwell on that for a minute? Last time I looked, we had like 36,000, and now just a couple of months later, we got over 40,000. And when you compare that against only like 2 years ago, we were way less than that. I mean, it seems to, notwithstanding the actual decline in as against year to date before, we do have a ton of installations here. And I wanted to get a handle on what that means. As soon as I stop my phone here, I'm doing my phone just to show you how. There we go. Seems like to me we've had an astronomical, a catapult in the past few years, and everybody has gone to solar. Everybody's wild about solar, and it is a zero baggage political initiative. Everybody wants solar. It's not only the installers; it's the homeowners and the principals of the committees in the legislature. Nobody stands in. You don't see any activists opposing solar on the rooftop, and interestingly enough, sometimes you see activists opposing solar farms. I'm sure I don't understand that exactly, but we have distinct. This article I think is helpful in the sense that we have distinguished ourselves as having resistance in so many areas on clean energy, but not this one. This one, everybody seems to agree. What do you see as the dynamic here?
Well, I wrote a piece last week for the Civil Beat where I was trying to make sense of those dynamics, and you may or may not remember a 1960s TV drama called Lost in Space. Did you ever watch Lost in Space when you were a younger Jay Fidel?
I can't remember actually, Marco, but thank you for raising.
Well, anyway, it started kind of a cult following. It lasted all of the several seasons, and one of the characters there was a robot, and it's one of the more kind of iconic robots in radio and TV and films. And this particular robot, who was the main character in this space drama, was fond of saying, "It does not compute." And I used that to lead off my piece last week in Civil Beat, because here you had the week or so before, Hilo announced on a 2-page press release that from 2012 to 2013, there was a 39% increase in total installed PV from 2012 to 2013, 39%, which is not a small number, to sneeze at.
Yeah.
And even on Oahu, it was an increase of 62% from 2012 to 2013 in terms of the increase in number of net energy metered systems, which are typically in the 3, 4, 5, 6 kilowatt range. So, it's hard to find a business person or an economist who would poo-poo the idea that 39% growth year to year, or 62% growth is somehow doing poorly. And yet, the many colleagues of mine, were pretty much furious with Hilo for supposedly somehow putting out not so much misinformation, but slanting it in an incorrect way, because late 2013 and especially into early 2014, there's a considerable amount of concern in the PV industry as there are more and more layoffs taking place and decreasing revenue streams. So that's what, to me, somehow this does not compute, that you had substantial and very robust growth year over year, and yet the overall attitude in the PV industry has been one of pretty deep pessimism and rather grim, to say the least. So I wanted to try to make sense of disparate data sets, because if you look at PV permits that were issued on Oahu in 2013, it was about 20% lower by total volume compared to 2012, and yet the utility said that a substantial increase in actual generating capability that went online took place. So how could that be? A lot fewer permits and yet more generating capacity and more systems. So to me, that somehow, at first glance, did not compute. And yet, when you consider the fact that there has been a substantial delay or time lag between when a permit has been pulled from Department of Permitting and Planning on Oahu and when the system actually goes online officially recorded by Hilo, then it begins to make sense how there could be substantially fewer permits in 2013 compared to the previous year, and yet a substantial increase in overall capacity. So what was reported by Hilo was, in fact, I believe, factually true and accurate, but a lot of those numbers of that substantial increase, not just on Oahu, but also across the state, took place because it reflected sales that were made in Q3 or Q4 of 2012, and it did not officially go online and get recorded by the respective utility company until sometime in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So the overall feeling in the industry, from what I gather, is one of great concern. There was a committee hearing on one of the various renewable energy bills that took place, a legislative hearing last week at the Capitol in Honolulu, and there were, according to the AP press report, there were more than 200 people there who were concerned about the reality of increasing grid saturation and more circuits in Hilo that are effectively being closed down, at least temporarily, as Hilo tries to find a near-term cost-effective solution to be able to increase and accommodate the number of additional PV systems that people want to put in. So it's a time of great ferment right now, and understandably, when you have a homeowner on a particular block who has seen his or her neighbor and auntie who have put on TV on their house down the street, and maybe as many as 40, 50 or more percent of the homes have PV on as you walk down the block. Well, they've waited a while and now they're ready to do it, and now they're being told that they can't because of grid saturation issues. I mean, it's understandable why there would be a lot of frustration about the current state of affairs as there's been such an explosive adoption in this product and this technology over the past several years.
Yeah, but I mean, the basic rule still pervades. We don't have meaningful storage technology, and solar only works during the day, and you have to have storage technology to make it work at night. So, the grid can't take all that it provides during the day. It doesn't really need it, and it's interesting is that the people have this mindset. Is that the industry? I think is that as long as we can install it, we need to keep going. That there's no end to this. That this is it's profitable business. I mean, some of those guys have done very, very well. So we need to continue it at the same pace. Nobody seems to build in the fact that there is a glass ceiling here, that you can't just make the whole state PV, not with the existing grid anyway. And nobody sees that there is an end to it, or at least a point where you have to slow down. And I don't understand why the public feels that way. I understand why some of the installers feel that way, because they don't want to lay anybody off. They want to continue to make money and stay in business. But I think there's a sort of a community denial over the fact that this can't go on at the same speed forever. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. And if you look at a lot of the commentary and the popular press in terms of letters to the editor and the earfuls that Hawaii legislators are getting from their constituents, to me, doesn't show a very accurate, adequate understanding of some basic fundamentals. It's just more this frustration born out of a sense of feeling that they've been denied something that others around them have been able to get, have been able to take advantage of. So
invidious comparison. It's old-fashioned invidious comparison is what it is.
Yes, and that trumps a more rational, analytical approach that you and I may take as far as, well, look, I mean, grids are finite, and there is a point at which adding more and more of this or that power source to the grid is going to be raising questions as to, well, just how far can we go in terms of adding more generating capacity of any kind to the grid. So that type of analysis, that type of discussion just doesn't seem to go anywhere with someone who feels that they have been denied something that people they know have been able to take advantage of, and that's kind of where it starts and stops, and it's real hard to make inroads with that.
Now, what about this hearing in the legislature where 200 people showed up? Was that the hearing where they were talking about adopting a bill that would require the PUC to in turn require the utility to take all power? Is that the one?
I believe so, and it was one of the more poignant reports I had seen, where you had by this Associated Press reporter who was observing that one or more of the people there were saying that they had actually had systems installed that they couldn't get interconnected in a timely fashion, that they were having to pay for the loan, the monthly payments for the loan, for a system that they weren't getting any value for, and that was actually interfering with them being able to pay for some type of cancer treatment.
Yes, I mean that was a very interesting article, and it went nationwide. Yes,
and the person cited by the reporter towards the end of the piece was Isaac Luke, if memory serves correctly. His name is Isaac Luke. He was from Wahiawa, and he was a 27-year-old installer, PV installer, that had been laid off from one of the major players on Oahu by the name of Alternate Energy, and that according to Mr. Luke, he stated that his former employer was in the practice of routinely installing PV systems that they knew, that Alternate Energy supposedly knew, that Hilo was not going to approve in a timely fashion, as in, it certainly implied to me that they were, according to this former installer, installing systems on homes that had yet to receive Hilo approval. And to me, that is a shameful type of behavior on the part of any PV contractor to knowingly engage in that kind of practice. And there's no telling exactly how many contractors have been doing that over the past months, or how many contractors are continuing to engage in that practice. But even if one contractor is doing it, no matter if they're small, medium, or large, to me it is unconscionable behavior on the part of a contractor to engage in that kind of practice of taking someone's money, installing a PV system before getting utility approval to proceed.
Yeah, well, it's a real big, huge deception, and people rely to their detriment on what they think is workable, and then they get injured, and they come to the legislature and cry, literally cry. That was in the AP article, how they were crying in the legislature about all their problems were focused on this thing. I just wonder, has any action ever been taken against an installer who deceived his customers that way?
Well, I don't know of any personally. I mean, there would be at least three avenues. One would be to lodge a complaint, formal complaint with the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, the DCCA. They're the ones who deal essentially with the oversight of licensed contractors. And, I mean, I don't know where Hilo is on this. I got to believe that they've been discussing this at a fairly high level as well, somewhere in those boardrooms there on Richard Street, is that what right does the utility have legally to essentially blackball or blacklist a contractor, a PV contractor that engages in this type of practice on a repeated basis?
Yeah, and you wonder where the government is on this. Ostensibly, somebody should be regulating somebody, don't you think? But let's take a break to think about that. This is Think Tech Talks here on a given Monday, and we're talking about whether PV computes. Does PV compute? With Marco Mangelsdorf of ProVision Solar, who joins us by telephone from Hilo. We'll be right back after this break.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're Think Tech Talks with Marco Mangelsdorf of ProVision Solar in Hilo, who joins us by telephone. And we're talking about whether PV computes. And there's a lot of issues around PV. PV has become, sort of the mainstream, the leading renewable, actually, in our state. It wasn't that way a few years ago, but it is now, and carries with it a number of issues. And one of them, of course, is this issue about installers telling their customers that they can connect when, in fact, they don't have permission to connect from the utility. And I think we'll have to assume for this discussion, we can discuss it in greater detail, but that not every request will be granted. Some will require a study, and some, the answer will be no for now, not until the technology changes. But, what troubles me is that nobody takes action against the installer who deceives his customer this way. And I find that extraordinary. I find it extraordinary that the government, particularly the legislature, would go after the utility about this when, in fact, there's wrongdoing going on, and nobody is going after the people who are affirmatively doing wrongdoing. Whose job would it be, Marco?
Well, again, initially at least, if someone has an issue regarding a licensed contractor they have entered into a legal agreement with to provide this or that product or service, and they feel that that contractor has behaved in an illegal or ethical fashion, then the first course is to pursue that with the state DCCA, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. And the DCCA has the ability to levy fines, as well as, in more extreme cases, actually suspend and take away the license of a company to do that work in the state.
We should get somebody on the show from DCCA to talk about exactly how they see this issue. You know, I mean, I think what's happened is we're pushing an envelope. We're on territory we have never been, nobody has been before. There's no particular agency or person actually leading the charge, and we have to sort of we have to grope our way through all these issues, and we can't resolve them so quickly because there's nobody who just shows the flag and tells us where to go on them. But you know, I think it's raised pretty well now, and there should be somebody who comes to the aid of the. But maybe it's the consumer advocate, because Jeff Ono, he's not necessarily limited to appearing on behalf of consumers in front of the PUC. He's kind of a consumer protector and of course we could talk about the consumer protector too. He's kind of a consumer protector for ratepayers. Okay, and this is certainly within that context. So maybe he's somebody who could take action on this. But let me go back to
another.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Jay, another avenue that can be taken is that the PV and the Solar Industry Associations here in the state, of which there are several, that it could be a much more high-profile item and higher priority for these trade organizations to do a stronger and better job of essentially policing its members. And that's something that I think has been lacking from the trade orgs. There's seemingly something of an unwillingness to really make it more public, make this kind of unacceptable practice more public, perhaps out of fear that it would somehow tarnish the entire industry. And this is one of those kind of dirty, not-so-secrets, nasty secrets that somehow shouldn't be discussed loudly and in public, because it wouldn't be to the benefit of the industry. And I'm speculating, but if that's the case, then that's something I think that needs to change immediately, because we have to do our best to take care of the consumers who are responsible for keeping us in business. And if this type of behavior continues, let alone expands out of desperation of contractors wanting and needing to make sales, keep crews busy, keep cash flow going, then I mean this has to be given a higher profile at multiple levels, so that those companies who have been engaging in this practice knock it off.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great idea. You know, it gets back to this whole thing about being a trade association. In this case, the Hawaii Solar Energy Association, in a landscape where there are, you know, some serious contentions, where the industry itself is at risk of losing business, where, you know, advocacy on the behalf of that industry means a lot in the legislature, where bills are pending and arguments are being conducted. But at the same time, you know, I think it's fair game to say that a trade association should engage in self-policing, because it wants to come to the legislature with clean skirts. It wants to be able to say, we do the best we can, you know, to the legislature, and now the rest is up to you. But if it comes to the legislature and without self-policing, you know, it's not nearly as persuasive, as influential, or shouldn't be, until it gets around to policing its own members.
Well, and might I suggest, Jay, that you contact my colleague and friend Chris DeBone, who just last week was elected the new president of the Hawaii Solar Energy Association. Mm-hmm. He is one of the principals Hawaii Energy Connection, or Kumukit, and they have been one of the major players, one of the top players on Oahu over the past 3 years, and I was very pleased to see Chris become the new president of the HSEA. So I would suggest that you try to get him on for a future show.
Yeah, thank you for that. But let me go to a thought I had while you were talking about this in the first place. You know, there have been some efforts lately to build solar farms. My recollection is that Larry Ellison is trying to build a bigger solar farm in Lanai than already exists that Murdoch built theirs. I don't know what, it must be 10 years ago. And there is some solar farms in Oahu that are being planned, and I think the utility wants to encourage them, or put them into the array of clean energy. And so you have this kind of competing thing with the industrial strength solar farm versus the proliferation of solar in everybody's rooftop. Is there room for both, Marco? What role do they play as against each other? Which one should we incentivize? Which one should we pay attention to? Which one is going to take us to the next step?
I don't think they're in conflict. I believe that they are two kind of parallel paths to getting us to where we want to go in terms of greater energy independence for our state. That said, I have long had issues with massive solar farms on kind of a couple different levels. One level, philosophically, is that solar energy is one of the more, if not most democratic energy sources on the planet, and to concentrate it in one particular area because it's convenient, to me, is not as appealing as being able to allow, instead of having a 5 or 10 megawatt utility scale for our state, because on the mainland the utility scale plants are in the several hundred megawatts, but for our state they're so far in the 5 plus 10 megawatt range that to me is, I'd rather see thousands and thousands of homeowners and businesses have smaller PV systems to make up 5 or 10 megawatts of total generating capacity than I would seeing it in one particular concentrated spot on Eva Plain or Kapolei or wherever the site happens to be.
Yeah, so where does the solar farm fit in the picture?
Well, it fits in the picture in that it allows the state to get to the 40% renewable energy by 2020, or is it 2030? I keep on forgetting.
20.
For the 2020, 70%
Yeah.
by 2020, or yeah.
No, I think 70% by 2030. Yeah.
Excuse me. So 40% renewable by 2030 and 30% out of through energy conservation means. So if you look at projections in terms of, well, how do we get there from here? It's difficult to see how we get there from here if we just rely on homeowners and business owners with PV systems on their homes and businesses. So there is a case to be made that if we want to achieve these goals, we have to have more larger utility scale generating facilities. And there's also a preference by utility companies to have 5 or 10 megawatts concentrated in one place, because that is a power source that they can more easily control and regulate than having those same 5 or 10 megawatts spread over thousands of separate roofs.
Yeah, and also you can do storage more efficiently if you have it concentrated, because as the solar is concentrated, so can the storage be concentrated essentially right next to it, and together those two producers can produce a constant stream of electrical energy, which is cool.
That's right. The same thing that the large wind farms over on the windward side, Kahuku, that when they're up to full power, they are using a storage means and conditioning means to try to smooth out the ups and downs of wind as the wind is speeding up and slowing down. So it's the same principle in terms of making the power being generated more dependable, more reliable, more predictable from minute to minute, second to second. and more acceptable to utility companies.
What happened with extreme batteries out there, supporting the wind installation and all that, trouble with the fire. Actually, there were multiple fires from and Extreme recently went bankrupt, by the way. I saw that in the paper. It put a blight on batteries. And the blight seems to be associated with wind, even though, you would use the same kind of facility to store power from solar. In other words, if you took a solar farm, this is like the one in Lanai, the existing one in Lanai. If you took a solar farm, you want to have a good source of resulting firm power. You put the batteries right next to it, and so now you get a source of firm power, a much firmer power. And I don't think a lot of that has happened in the state. And I think the batteries that were used with the wind have sort of put a blight on wind, even though you'd use the same batteries for the solar installations. So I think we have created a kind of political baggage with these battery installations like the extreme power one. And I think we have to get over that, because if we want solar to be 24/7, we're going to have storage. And I think we're moving further from that. There's a lot of criticism over wind now. Everybody's getting all excited. Wind has got political resistance going on. Why, I don't know, but nobody wants to be next to wind.
Right.
And part of that is the battery problem, but the batteries are going to be in any place where you have non-firm power.
Well, that said, I do want to observe that on Molokai, the MECO and the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, HNEI Rick Rocheleau, that they are going to be teaming up HNEI and MECO to put in a 3 megawatt battery bank there at the one and only MECO power plant as an effort to improve power quality there on that relatively small grid. And I believe there are other multi-megawatt batteries that are going to be going in on a test basis as well.
Yeah, in Molokai, right?
So,
It's something even more than 3 megawatts. I want to say 17, could it be? But a lot of battery is planned for Molokai.
Yeah, the 17 megawatts you just referred to was the plan proposed by this group out of California called the Princeton Energy Group.
Yeah.
That kind of came out of nowhere 5 or 6 weeks ago and said, boy, do we have a great idea for you. We want to do 17 megawatt solar farm right outside of Kaunakakai and do pumped hydro, and voila, all your problems will be answered. So, that was that's of a more ambitious scale than simply 3 megawatt battery next to the MECO power plant on the island.
Yeah, that's right. It was not battery so much as a big solar farm. It strikes me that that happens from time to time. These companies come to town, and they come up with a big idea, big exciting idea, which they haven't vetted very well, and it sort of throws things off because you take it. Maybe the newspaper takes it too seriously. At the end of the day, it comes down to leadership to say whether this is going to be really possible or not possible. But
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, before we sign off, Jay, it just occurred to me that maybe we should talk a little bit about the feed-in tariff program, which has kind of dropped off a lot of people's radar screen. The feed-in tariff program was pondered over several years by the PUC and by the utility companies, by the legislature, and it was launched in December of 2011. And so we now have passed 2+ years of it being supposedly available. And just to remind you and the listeners, the feed-in tariff was designed to allow the project developers and owners of PV systems and other renewable energy systems anywhere from, let's say, a few kilowatts to as much as 5 megawatts on Oahu and 2.5 megawatts maximum on Maui and the Big Island. It was supposed to encourage investors and companies to install fairly large PV systems for revenue. In other words, it wouldn't be necessarily offsetting a load or the consumption of an existing facility in terms of electricity, but it would be essentially a mini power plant that would be connected to the grid, where the utility would be paying for that power through a 50, 60 page legal contract for 20 years at a fairly advantageous feed-in tariff rate that was, again, set by the PUC back in 2011.
Now, I remember there was a lot of issue about what those rates exactly were going to be. There were all kinds of public hearings and meetings and input and feedback about those rates. Did they ever get established?
Yes, they did. The program went live in December of 2011, and it has been, I think, very disappointing to many of the stakeholders, from the PUC to the utility companies to project developers. And back in last fall, I believe it was October, the PUC essentially froze the program. So the FIT program, the feed-in tariff program, has effectively been frozen now for a number of months. It's not possible for any new wannabe FIT project developer to be able to get into the program and propose a system and go through the usual hoops, because the program has effectively been shut down, at least temporarily. And I know there have been efforts by various parties to try to move to what's been described as FIT 2.0, but here we are in February, and as far as I know, there are no plans, there's no immediate time frame to see the FIT program reintroduced, bigger, better, meaner, leaner, and to be a component in bringing more renewables online.
I'm so glad you raised that, Marco, because I think that does relate directly to what we're talking about, and it's connected logically and de facto with the explosion of photovoltaic. But let's take a quick break. This is Think Tech Talks. We're talking about whether PV computes. Does PV compute? With Marco Mangelsdorf, the progenitor of ProVision Solar, who joins us by telephone from Hilo, Hawaii, and we're here in Honolulu broadcasting from the core of downtown in Pioneer Plaza. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. We're back. We're live. We're Think Tech Talks. We're talking about whether PV computes, and we love to talk about PV with Marco Mangelsdorf and ProVision Solar, who joins us from Hilo, Hawaii. And come up with a kind of revelation here about whatever happened to the feed-in tariff, FIT. What went off the side with that? We had all this hoopla about it, and all these meetings and establishing these rates where you could make your investment in some kind of renewable and then sell it on a long-term basis, make a return on your investment, sell it to the utility. But now it's been frozen. It's not going anywhere. Everybody's focusing on the older system, which was net energy metering in connection with photovoltaic installations. So why do you think it got frozen, actually, Marco?
Well, let me make one important clarification, which is that there have been, I don't have it right in front of me, Jay, but I know there have been somewhere in the dozens of FIT systems that actually have gone online, are producing power on Oahu, on Maui, and the Big Island. So it's not as if the program has been a total fiasco in terms of nothing going in. Systems have been going in. People have been getting paid by the month or by the quarter by the utility company. And there are FIT systems which are continuing to be permitted, FIT systems that were approved and in the queue, in the active queue, before the program was frozen last October. So to go back to your question, what happened? How did it go off the rails? Why was it effectively frozen? Again, I'm not privy to the discussions that went on amongst the commissioners and the staff as to exactly why they took this action, but from my perspective, a couple of reasons seem to jump out at me. One is that there was concern over the perhaps overly generous FIT payments that were approved in terms of the cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
Because, in this day and age, utility company Hilo is closing deals with providers for long-term power purchase agreements on Oahu in the teen cents. In other words, 12, 13, 14 cents a kilowatt hour, whereas some of the FIT pricing is 18, 19, and goes as high as 27 cents per kilowatt hour that would be paid to the FIT system owner over a period of 20 years. So that was one concern, I think, is that, do we really need to be that generous? Should we be that generous given other alternatives? And the second concern that I know was substantial was the feeling that the FIT system had to some degree been gamed by a number of the players. And what I mean by that is that there were a number of companies that were essentially ready to go at the opening bell in December of 2011, who within hours or days of the FIT reservation system going online, that a number of companies were essentially able to come in and reserve sometimes the majority of the capacity for that particular tier, whether tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And you had a small number of companies. I'm most familiar with the Big Island and Helco. You had a very small number of companies that were able to grab 60, 70 or more % of the queue space within days. So, and I happen to know that one of these companies was local in the state, and one of these companies was from the mainland. And many of those systems, proposed systems, that they were able to get reservations for capacity in the queue, to my knowledge, not a single one of them now, more than 2 years later, has actually broken ground, let alone gone live and starting producing power. So it begs the question, well, should there be some value put on shovel-ready projects? And if so, then how do we go about, the PUCs asking themselves, how do we go about cleansing the queue, purging the queue, to get rid of these bogus systems, or bogus, not bogus companies, but companies that have been able to grab queue space with little likelihood that that particular reservation is going to lead to a PV system being operational in the future, if at all.
It takes a good memory to follow these kinds of initiatives. I think most people either didn't know or forgot already about the feed-in tariff. It sort of went off the radar, out of sight, out of mind, for the reasons you mentioned, or perhaps just other things, eclipsed it. And I think that's the way if things happen in an initiative which doesn't have a clear leadership. They pop up. There's all this noise. I bet if we go back to the newspaper, we'll find reams of articles about how the feed-in tariff was going to change things. And then all of a sudden, it just goes away ever so quietly. So many things like that. I mean, nobody even, it may be dead, but nobody buried it. And I think I would really like to see sort of a better accounting. You come up with an initiative, you excite the public, you spend all this ink and time, educating people about it, and then it goes away. Nobody says a word. I don't know how we got to do better than that. And I'm reminded of on-bill financing. We're still waiting for that, aren't we? Have you seen that come out yet? Is it coming out?
Yes, we are waiting for it, and I'm not saying it's not a good idea. Any way that makes it easier for a homeowner who couldn't otherwise afford or get a PV system on their home, I think I have to be in favor of. That said, I mean, it is so darn easy now compared to even a couple, 3 years ago for a homeowner, even not with necessarily good credit. It's so easier for them now to be able to get a PV system on the roof when 2 or 3 years it was a lot more difficult. That I don't believe that on-bill financing is going to provide that, once it is rolled out formally, it's going to provide that big of a bump in terms of, now I'm ready to do it, says Mr. and Mrs. Typical Homeowner.
Yeah.
Especially in light of the at least near-term constraints of the growing number of circuits, of utility circuits that are reaching the 100% threshold.
Yeah. So there's, and you and I have discussed, all the installing companies, and the most successful ones are the ones from the mainland who have financing arrangements built into their business model. They can do great financing, and their financing is going to be more attractive because it already exists, and because they're big companies, know how to handle it, than on-bill financing, which doesn't yet exist, and which may or may not be as smooth or as as easy to do as these guys from the mainland. So, and I'm wondering if we have another eclipse on our hands, don't you think, Marco? Just as the feed-in tariff got eclipsed, maybe on-bill financing stands a chance of being eclipsed by the fact that other people moved into the space on a private basis while we were, getting our act together.
Yes.
Anyway, you wanted to talk also very briefly before we close about the Department of Taxation and the numbers from 2012. What are we waiting for on that score?
Well, waiting for GoTax to release the numbers showing what homeowners and business owners, corporations claimed for the solar tax credit for tax year calendar year 2012. So now we're obviously in February of 2014, and there's always going to be a substantial lag in terms of reporting that kind of data. But I would think it'd be coming any time, but it's a challenge to get our Department of Taxation friends to really come clean with any type of projected data about releasing data like that. So I'm hopeful it'll come out soon, and to what extent it's going to make a ripple in the legislature when it does come out, because obviously 2012 data and figures for the people claiming the tax credits compared to 2011 will be substantially more than the 70 some odd million that people claimed in 2011. But it's difficult to say kind of what's going to get the legislature interested or not. And I got to admit that I got it wrong earlier this year and late last year, Jay, when I thought that revisiting the solar tax credit, the state solar tax credit, would be a priority of this legislature. And in fact, it's turned out to be anything but, from what I can tell, after the failed efforts to redo it last session. So there seems to be a collective acceptance on the part of the key players in the legislature and also the industry, the PV industry, solar industry, that maybe we shouldn't mess with the tax credit right now. We'll accept what the revisions that the Department of Taxation announced in November of 2012, which were officially made permanent a number of months ago, and let's leave well enough alone and not take on take this challenge up again. So I was surprised by that. I thought there would be a motivation and momentum to revisit it, but that doesn't appear to be the case.
No, well, I think it has a certain radioactivity to it, and I think everybody has agreed to let it lie for a while, and while they focus on trying to force the PUC, to force the utility to take all power. But that we'll follow that. I hope you and I can get together in the next few weeks and revisit and track it as it goes down the line.
Well, plus it's, of course, it's an election year, right, Jay? We got the entire state house that's going to be up for re-election. We have a good chunk of the 51 senators that are up for re-election, and we have the top executive office holder as well up for re-election. So I guess there's got to be some type of politics involved, too, in terms of maybe we just don't want to take this on an election year.
Yeah, these are interesting times. Marco Mangelsdorf, ProVision Solar, who joins us by telephone from Hilo, Hawaii. This is Think Tech Talks, talking about photovoltaic, does PV compute, and many other related issues. Always a joy to talk to you, Marco. Thank you so much.
Same here, Jay. Great pleasure. Hope we can pick it up again soon.
Aloha.